June 26, 1943. This week, the French resistance falls apart only 2 months after it finally looked like it could become a united front against Nazism and fascism. Before we start today's program, here's a word from the Time Ghost Army.
Never forget. Never give up. Never surrender. Join the Time Ghost Army.
This is War Against Humanity, a series of World War II in real time. I'm Spartacus Olsson. Last week, General Rudolf Lutters declared victory in Operation Schwarz against the Yugoslav partisans. But while that partisan army was badly mauled, the bulk of it managed to escape into the mountains to fight another day. Archie Wavell and Claude Auchinleck were promoted to Viceroy of British India and Commander-in-Chief in India, respectively, stoking further anti-British feeling as colonial policy continues to cause more and more hunger deaths in Bengal. Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler and German Führer Adolf Hitler met to discuss the eradication of bandits behind the German lines. This week, Himmler again turns his attention to his perceived root enemy, the Jews. On June 21, 1943, Heinrich Himmler orders the final liquidation of the remaining ghettos in occupied Eastern Europe. The majority of Jews in occupied Poland and Soviet Union have already been murdered. The remaining Jews are being worked to death in the labor and concentration camps. Some remain confined in the somewhat less deadly ghettos. Of the close to 3 million Jews living in the Western USSR before it was occupied, more than half have been murdered, several 100,000 deported to concentration camps, a few 100,000 have escaped in evacuations with the Red Army or joined the partisans. Only between 310 and 320,000 remain, the vast majority in ghettos. So, Himmler orders the higher SS and police leader in Ostland and the chief of the SS Economic and Administrative Main Office that all the Jews still in ghettos in the Ostland are to be confined to concentration camps. They shall be prohibited from working outside the camps from August onwards, and a new concentration camp will be established near Riga for the manufacture of clothing and equipment for the Wehrmacht. As many male Jews as possible should also be sent to mine oil shale. He notes that inmates of the Jewish ghettos who are not required are to be evacuated to the east. As we know, evacuated is the SS euphemism for murder in the extermination factories. It's a continuation of Himmler's shift towards extermination by slave labor. And once again, the singling out of able-bodied men will mean that the minority of elderly, infirm, women, children, and infants still in the ghettos will be systematically murdered. Meanwhile, in Germany proper, the faint-hearted, when hearing of these things, will try to pin the atrocities on a few rogue fanatics and often repeat the saying, "If the Führer only knew." This week, one bleeding heart in the higher Nazi circles finds out beyond equivocation that the Führer knows very well. On June 24th, Adolf Hitler meets with Baldur von Schirach and his wife Henriette, the daughter of Hitler's personal photographer Heinrich Hoffmann. Baldur, previously the head of the Hitlerjugend, is since 1940 the Gauleiter of Vienna and is as such charged with the deportation of the Jews there, a task he seems to agree with ideologically, saying in 1942 that the deportation of Jews enhanced the European culture. If Henriette ever agreed is unclear, but recently, while visiting Amsterdam, she witnessed a razzia. She was shocked by the barbaric treatment of Jewish women and children. As some other Germans, she was convinced that this could not be her Führer's intention. Henriette is not only a famously outspoken and self-assured character, she has known Hitler for over 20 years, since she was 10 years old. During her studies in 1930, she briefly served as his secretary, and at 17 was one of the Führer's underage love interests. They are on a first-name basis, and Henriette feels it within her rights to confront Adolf about the atrocities she has witnessed. Baldur is not so convinced that this is a good idea and has tried to dissuade her, but she proceeds with her plan. Unsurprisingly, Adolf is unimpressed and instead bursts out in anger. "You are a sentimentalist. What business of yours is it? The Jewesses are none of your business. Sheer sentimentality, all this. Tittle-tattle about humanity." According to Hitler's adjutant, Nicholas von Below, Baldur adds insult to injury by also appealing to the Führer to end the war. Hitler, dumbfounded, later complains to von Below. "How does he imagine this? He knows as well as I do that there is no more way out apart from me putting a bullet in my head." The von Schirachs are pressed to leave the Berghof at once and depart Berchtesgaden at 5 in the morning. While Baldur retains his post and neither of them see any direct consequences of their words, they will never again be received by the Führer, and Henriette's plea will have no effect on the mass murder committed in her nation's name. But Germany is not the only axis committing mass murder by labor. In Japanese-occupied Burma and Thailand, the deadly construction of a railway through the jungle that began a year ago continues. This month, the wooden bridge over the river Kwai is replaced by one made of reinforced concrete. The finished line will be 415 kilometers long and connect Ban Phon, Thailand with Tan Bio Sayat, Burma, making it easier for Japan to supply their Burma-India front and eventually enable invasion of India. The bulk of the labor force are recruited foreign workers from all over East and South Asia. While recruitment was initially on a voluntary basis, soon thousands of civilians were press-ganged into forced unpaid labor for the Japanese. In total, there are between 180,000 and 200,000 of these slaves, supplemented by roughly 60,000 Allied POW. The planned route passes through treacherous terrain, including the Three Pagodas Pass. Instead of working from two ends towards each other, different work parties have been constructing separate sections that are to be joined as construction proceeds. The teams are isolated in separate camps that, already in the best of conditions by their location, hard to supply and managed with total disregard for the slaves' lives. They face brutally long work days up to 18 hours, a lack of food and medicine, disease, parasites, biting insects, poisonous snakes, and the ever-present threat of random beatings and murder by Japanese guards. And now come the rains and muds of the monsoon season. One Scottish soldier, Alistair Urquhart, recounts his experiences of working on the Japanese railway. "These days of hell continued day in, day out, night after night of itching, scratching till you drew blood or pain. The word is that we are to go further upriver to build a bridge, and the Japs, as usual, were promising more rice if all men work hard. But we were not taken in by this, after months of working on empty stomachs, riddled by disease, just an existence. To see and hold the hands of your friends and fellow soldiers dying from starvation, their bodies twisted in pain and the fear in their eyes, haunts me still. Many a brave man died of broken spirits, and although most of us did what we could to bolster their spirits when clinical depression set in, it was a losing battle. The will to live was uppermost in my mind, even when the brutality was at its worst, or one was permanently sweating as dysentery tore the lining of your stomach, or malaria, dengue, or just the hopelessness of our position. We were expendable. Men were dying in droves as the conditions got worse." By the time it's completed, roughly 90,000 East and Southeast Asian civilians and 13,000 Allied POWs will have died. And this is not the only railway line the Japanese are laying down on the bones of their victims. In the occupied Dutch East Indies, the Pekanbaru Railroad is to connect East and West Sumatra so that troops can be transported across land and evade patrolling Allied warships and submarines. Construction of the railroad is planned to start this summer, and already up to 22,000 Indonesians are being rounded up in droves to work as forced laborers. Rumusha. Over the following months, tens of thousands more will be press-ganged. Like in Burma and Thailand, they will face poor nutrition, disease, and abuse. Those working on the Pekanbaru Railroad will have a shockingly low survival rate. Close to 80% will perish. The recruitment drive of Rumusha is supported by Indonesian nationalists like Sukarno and Mohammed Hatta. Last year, in 1942, Japanese commander Hitoshi Imamura asked Sukarno to mobilize support for the Japanese war effort. Sukarno then reformed his nationalist talking points to fit the mold of the Japanese imperialist concept of Pan-Asianism, and now even signs off some of his speeches with the Japanese Banzai. In exchange, Sukarno and Hatta have received tangible political power. In 1943, they become directors of the Putera, the Center for People's Power, allowing them to administer schools and sport and media organizations. While this at least seems to be a step towards Sukarno's ultimate goal of an autonomous Indonesian state, it comes at the price of enabling the Japanese to exploit Indonesia and its people. Millions of Sukarno's fellow countrymen will be enslaved, and hundreds of thousands will die in what is de facto not a move to freedom from colonialism, but the hegemony of new colonial masters. And while in East Asia and in Europe thousands fall to their deaths by exhaustion, it is bombs that continue to fall on Germans and Italians in their cities. On the 21st, Naples is targeted by 100 Flying Fortress bombers. A day later, the smaller town of Salerno is the destination for a smaller U.S. bomber group, and on the 24th, Sardinia is attacked by a total of 300 aircraft. The damage is severe, but pales in comparison to the destruction wrought by the Battle of the Ruhr. On June 21st, 705 RAF aircraft depart for the German town of Krefeld. Although they lose 6.2% of the attacking force, 44 aircraft, the RAF must consider the raid a relative success. 47% of the built-up area of Krefeld is destroyed. The registers show that the bombing has left 72,000 people without a home, 4,550 people wounded, and 1,056 people killed. The following night, 557 aircraft hit Mülheim, injuring 1,174 and killing 578. On the 24th, Wuppertal, which already took a heavy beating in late May, is visited by 630 aircraft. They dropped their ordnance on Eberfeld, the half of the city that was still standing, destroying 94% of the town. 2,400 people are injured and 1,800 are killed. While the Allies strike at the Germans strike at the resistance in France. The Gestapo have long been at the heels of several cells of the French resistance, especially those working with the British Special Operations Executive SOE for sabotage. As we have seen here, and you may have seen in Astrid Spies and Ties episodes, the brazen activities of the SOE and the French resistance integration of espionage and active resistance in the same cells has become a dangerous cocktail, endangering both the resistance itself and the Allied intelligence operations in France. So far, the central operations of the resistance have managed to get by, albeit with many losses and near misses. This week, the Gestapo strikes in force. On the 21st, a group of freshly dropped Canadian agents are apprehended by German troops in the Loire. They carry messages for other agents with addresses and personal details. Most notably, perhaps, to the Prosper SOE network in Paris, responsible for numerous sabotage actions, securing weapon drops, gathering intelligence, and so on. By now, the network has grown dangerously large with hundreds of operatives. With size comes connections and more exposure. While the Gestapo have been surveilling many of them, they have so far not found tangible entry points to strike at. The Canadian agents' material provides the missing links they need to know how to cut the head off Prosper and start rolling it up. Beginning on the 23rd, they first arrest the second-in-command, André Borel, codenamed Denise, the first female SOE agent to be parachuted into France last year in September. A few days later, they have Prosper himself, Francis Sutil, and several other agents. It's not Borel who has betrayed them, though. According to multiple witnesses, she displays a silence so disdainful that the Germans did not attempt to break it. Sutil and the others are, however, interrogated and tortured, and at least one of them ends up talking. In the next weeks, almost the entire Prosper network will be rolled up. Look for upcoming episodes of Spies and Ties to learn more details about the fate of all of these and many more agents in France. But the heaviest blow is arguably a separate event on the same day the Canadian agents are taken, June 21st. But before we get there, let's backtrack to a fortnight ago. On June 7th, René Hardy, one of the leaders of resistance sabotage activities, traveling on a train from Lyon to Paris, is recognized by a Frenchman working for the German Abwehr and a turned resistance operative. They arrest Hardy and turn him over to the Feldgendarmerie at the next station. Previously, on the train, Hardy is met with General de Lestrin, leader of the Armée Secrète, the armed resistance, and 2 of his men. The agents get back on the train and recognize de Lestrin and his men in another compartment. They do not know that Hardy is already caught. The agents stay close but undiscovered all the way to Paris, where a few hours later, de Lestrin and his men are arrested. Hardy's capture remains a secret, while the resistance soon finds out that the leader of the secret army has been caught. On June 10th, de Lestrin and Hardy, separately and still without knowledge of each other, are transferred into the hands of head of the Gestapo in Lyon, Klaus Barbie. True to his nature, Barbie inflicts terrible torture on both men. De Lestrin says nothing. What happens to Hardy at this point is unclear. Either he cracks and is turned, or he doesn't and is simply released. If it's the latter, he has been betrayed by his fiancée, Ludie Bastien, who is possibly working for the Germans. To this day in 2022, it remains unclear which of the two it is. What is clear is that Hardy tells no one of his misadventure, and the Gestapo soon use him to strike their most severe blow to French resistance during the war so far, either by tailing him after release or because he gives up the time and location when some very important resistance leaders will be present. The meeting is at Dr. Frédéric Dugoujon's practice in Caillure-et-Cuire, a suburb of Lyon. Unbeknownst to the Gestapo and SS, it's the meeting to choose who will replace de Lestrin. Present beyond the host, Dr. Dugoujon, is de Lestrin's Chief of Staff, Henri Aubry, Bruno Lara, leader of Airdrop and Landings Operations Center, André Lassagne, one of de Lestrin's deputies, Raymond Aubrac, leader of Libération Sud and one of the architects of the Armée Secrète, Albert Lacaze, head of the 4e Bureau, the intelligence arm of the Armée Secrète, Émile Schwarzfeld, the main candidate to succeed de Lestrin, Jean Moulin, codenamed Rex, the de facto operational leader of the resistance, who in the past year has managed to finally unite the politically opposed major French resistance movements under General de Gaulle's leadership in the National Council of the Resistance. And of course, René Hardy. At 2:40 p.m., just after Moulin arrives half an hour late, 8 SS and Gestapo men under Barbie's leadership descend on the meeting. They arrest everyone except Hardy, who manages to get away in the fracas, adding to the confusion about his role in the whole affair. It takes a full 2 days until Barbie realizes that he has actually captured Rex, the very leader of the French resistance. As this week ends, the men are facing the murderous sadism of Barbie and his men. But so far, no one is talking. No matter what happens next, the event at the doctor's practice in Caillure-et-Cuire of June 21st, 1943, will continue to create controversy to this day. I grew up in France, and as a teenager I followed the legal process against Klaus Barbie, because as some of you will know, he will escape justice until 1983, and only then stand trial for the atrocities and death he inflicted on defenseless people during this war. The enigmatic, somewhat tragic Jean Moulin remains a national hero in France, and of course, René Hardy remains a figure of great controversy. They and Barbie have become characters in a complex drama of national trauma that is still unresolved, despite that they and almost anyone who ever met them in 1943 have passed. They and others have inspired the cardboard figures of good guys and bad guys of an entire industry of Hollywood epics, novels, and drama series. To me, as a child, Moulin was a role model, and Barbie a boogie monster. Here's the thing, though. They were human, and they were complex. Like anyone, there's nothing about them that was clear-cut or easy to understand. Both considered themselves civil servants. Both were loyal to the cause they served. But what does make them special is that when caught in a time of greater difficulty than anyone can imagine, one of them, Bobby, went beyond the call of duty and chose to be a monster, and the other, Moulin, chose to be a hero, despite that he didn't know if he would finally be able to stand up to the pressure of evil. Perhaps best reflected by his suicide attempt when imprisoned for refusing to collaborate in the early days of occupation, and a letter to his parents just before that when France fell in 1940, where he wrote, "If the Germans, who are capable of anything, make me say dishonorable words, you already know it is not the truth." If ever we should fall into the same darkness, we can only pray to be as wise and recognize our possible human weakness and as strong to finally overcome it for humanity. Never forget.